Hello there, Keith King here from AncientSymbolist.com. My video today is on the Freemasons' quest to cure cancer. I have slightly deviated from my other videos on Freemasonry. This is because I have just seen a clip of an image of a cave in Malta, that when a frequency of 111 Hz is applied in the cave, it seems that it cures cancer. Now, before anybody says this is a load of rubbish, we should see who the people were who used this cave. This particular cave is known as the Maltese Hypogeum. It is in fact an ancient temple, dating back to around 3600 BC. It covers some 500 square meters. Inside this temple is a smaller chamber. This chamber is called the Oracle Chamber. It is in this chamber that a frequency of 111 Hz resonates. These caves or temples were originally used by physicians or doctors who were assigned to the Knights Templars. These physicians were known as hospitaliers. They were charged with caring for the Christian pilgrims who journeyed to the Holy Land. Any pilgrims that got sick on the journey were immediately taken to Malta for treatment. Now we get to the interesting part. What treatment did they use? It seems as if they used frequency waves. This video will cover how these Knights Templars came into the possession of this technology, and also why they have kept this knowledge going in their schools. You should continue watching until the end to see how everything we now know has come to fruition. One day in the future, this knowledge may save your life. So please subscribe and press the like button. So how did these Freemasons discover how to use this technology? Well, here goes. The original Knights of France knew of a story that had been handed down since their forefathers had been exiled from Israel. This story told of a secret vault that King Solomon had built to store the most sacred treasures of the Israelites. These were the Ark of the Covenant, Aaron's rod, and the pot of manna. This story has not been made up. Here is a Masonic tracing board showing the secret chamber underneath the Temple of Jerusalem. And here is the Ark of the Covenant displayed in all its glory at the Grand Lodge of England. And here is what could be called a replica of Aaron's rod. What's not generally known is that King Solomon was extremely concerned that the enemies of Israel might make war and steal these sacred treasures. So he had replicas made of all three objects. These were to be placed on display in the Holy of Holies, whilst the originals were to be housed in the secret vault under the temple. After the temple was completed, King Solomon was visited by the wealthiest woman in the world, who owned all of the water wells in Africa and therefore controlled the lucrative caravan routes. Her name was the Queen of Sheba. King Solomon showed the Queen of Sheba the treasures of Israel, including the Ark of the Covenant. And then King Solomon married the Queen of Sheba. Together they had a son, whom they called Menelik. When King Solomon died, Menelik returned to Jerusalem and took one of the arks back with him to Axum in Ethiopia, where he then built a small temple to house the Ark of the Covenant. However, in order to use the Ark, a tuning fork was required. We now know that tuning forks are used to correctly tune the frequency of musical instruments. Here is my tuning fork, preset at 128 Hz. And here is an image of a priest outside the temple in Axum, Ethiopia, where the Ark was stored, with his own tuning fork, indicating that the Ark had to be fine-tuned to perform its duties. So what is frequency? Frequency is the number of waves or cycles that pass by a fixed point in a unit of time. The unit of time is usually 1 second. It can also be classed as noise or vibrations per second. Today in hospitals, we use different frequencies to destroy different types of cancer. How do I know this? I have researched this because I have just been diagnosed with radical prostate cancer and have chosen to have my prostate treated with radiotherapy. This technique uses golden beads inserted into the prostate and then radio beams which will be aimed at those golden beads at a certain frequency. The frequency used is in the band used for X-rays. These are usually megahertz. This treatment is said to destroy the tumours in 90% of the cases. So how do we create and change frequencies? We all know that the music channels on the radio operate within certain frequencies. And in order to tune into the frequency required, a coil of wire is wrapped around a rod and placed into an electrical circuit. This coil is known as an inductor, and then two metallic plates that are spaced evenly apart with an insulating component in between them are also placed in the circuit. These two plates make what is known as a capacitor. When the electrical values of the coil and the plates are equal, we have what's known as resonant frequency. I have often wondered if the two cherubim, made out of the metal gold and placed on top of the Ark of the Covenant, were in fact capacitors that created a certain frequency. We can move the values of the frequency up and down by tapping into the coil at different intervals. These coils are then called varistors. Could they have used this coil system on a rod to cure people many years ago? Well, here is Moses telling the people, all who look upon the coiled serpent upon the rod will be saved. The coiled serpent maybe just represents a coil of wire. Moses and the spiral coil on the rod may just possibly have become known as Aaron's rod, just to show how important the serpent is. Here is the serpent incorporated into the shepherd's crook. It is placed in front of the bandstand in this Masonic church. Interestingly, the serpent entwined upon the rod became the symbol for medicine and is shown in the hands of the knights on this outside wall of the hospital in Sydney. It is also shown as the caduceus and is usually shown in the hands of Mercury the communicator of knowledge. This image of Mercury traversing the universe is displayed in the Grand Lodge of England. The Freemasons of the Grand Lodge of England based their ritual on the historical events surrounding King Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. The Knights Templars of France went on a crusade to Jerusalem. Their mission was to rediscover where the secret vault of King Solomon was placed. How did they know about the secret vault placed under the temple at Jerusalem? It is all contained in their ritual. Everything the Knights Templars discovered that was related to what was taught in King Solomon's temple was brought back to Europe and was to be taught in their newly created schools and churches. Unfortunately for the Knights Templars, their knowledge brought them great wealth and power, and because the King of France at the time saw this as a threat, he outlawed the organisation. The head of the Templars at the time was Jacques de Molay. Because the Templars were outlawed by the King of France, they then fled Europe and went to Scotland and America and became associated with the Freemasons. They then created schools in America that were assigned to de Molay, and now most of this knowledge was to be taught in what we now know as temples. In turn, these temples were upgraded to become colleges. They mainly taught 7 subjects, which are still referred to today in a Masonic lodge. Firstly, geometry, because geometry encompasses all the other subjects. The next subject was grammar, so the lessons could be written down. Next came rhetoric, so the subject could be memorized. Next came logic, so the item in question could be built correctly. Next came arithmetic, so the quantity of materials and the necessary time required to execute the design of the project could be properly determined. Next came music and the discovery of the different notes and their aligned frequencies. And lastly, astronomy. This ensured that by understanding the 6 previous subjects, any student could now properly measure the time. The Freemasons' symbol for time is the hourglass. To measure the time, they used 3 astronomical calendars, and once every 40 years, these 3 calendars would all precisely come back into alignment with each other. These 3 calendars were known as the Sun calendar, that represents 365.25 days, the Moon calendar of 13 months, and the Solar calendar of 40 years, which represents 5 rotations of the planet Venus around the Sun. Each rotation of Venus around the Sun takes 8 of Earth years and draws a perfect 5-pointed star. And each time Venus rotates 5 times around the Sun, all 3 calendars align perfectly in time. As I have said, this is achieved every 40 years. In a Freemasons lodge, these 3 calendars are represented by 3 pillars, one representing the Sun, one representing the Moon, and one representing the Master of the Lodge and Venus. These calendars were very important to keep all of the festival days correctly positioned to the correct time of the year. One festival day that had to be correctly planned was the Passover feast. This feast was always to occur on the spring equinox, which is the day when there are 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. This day was also to be called the day of At One Ment, or the Day of Atonement. All of this was the task of the teachers, sometimes known as the high priests, or Sandhedran. They had a language which they interpreted to be Sanskrit. This was where they literally poured sand on a metal plate and played a musical instrument. The musical instrument moved the sand around the metal plate and created a symbol at a certain frequency. This frequency was noted against the symbol it created, and they would use these symbols to hide this secret knowledge. One such symbol was to be called the mystic tie, also known as the analema. Here is the mystic tie placed upon St. Paul's Cathedral, built by the Freemason Christopher Wren. The analema indicates the precise position of the days of the month throughout the year. Today, these 12 months are assigned from January to December, but originally the 12 months were assigned to the 12 zodiac signs. The 3 calendars are usually shown on various tracing boards associated with Freemasonry. Here on this tracing board is the Sun, the Moon, and the pentagram for Venus. During Roman times, to study you went to a college. As you can see, at these colleges they drew up dates for the holidays. These colleges built bridges, that is to connect the earthly with the divine. These colleges were also credited to the priest king. These colleges use symbols to indicate what realm of knowledge you wish to learn, and they are still in existence today. The oldest college in the United States of America is Harvard. It was created in 1636. Its emblem for the business and medical school is 5 clamshells. These 5 clamshells represent the 5 rotations of Venus and the solar calendar. Now, in nearly every church throughout the world, there is an image of John the Baptist initiating Jesus into this mystery school with the clamshell. Now, if you don't know the symbol for the Knights Templars, it is the clamshell. Today, young people are baptized by water from the clamshell. Who was John the Baptist? He was the son of the high priest of the temple, whose name was Zechariah. As I have already stated, the priests of the temple in Jerusalem were known as the Sandhedran. They taught Sanskrit, an ancient Indian system of learning, where sand literally writes on a plate and creates certain symbols at a certain frequency. This all leads me back to the cave in Malta. Why did the Knights Templars choose Malta? Well, Malta has approximately 17 of the oldest temples in the world. Malta was originally ruled by the Phoenicians, and it was the Phoenician king Hiram of Tyre who assisted King Solomon to build the temple at Jerusalem, and also entrusted his most senior architect Hiram Abiff to actually lay out the plans and construct the temple. The Phoenicians were the original masters of the seas, and they gave safe passage to the knights of the temple and their associated order, the Hospitallers, who were given their charter in the year 10,048. The Hospitallers, who healed the sick in this temple in Malta, were also known as the Knights of St. John the Baptist. It is recorded that they created a musical chart consisting of various notes which they called syllables. Each syllable or note was written at a higher pitch than the previous note. These notes had a mathematical resonance. There were 6 tones or syllables used on this musical scale, and in turn these notes became known as the hymn to St. John the Baptist and was always chanted on his feast day of the 24th of June. St. John the Baptist is the patron saint of Freemasonry, and still today, the 24th of June is celebrated in lodges throughout the world as St. John's Day. These 6 notes were called the solfege syllables. At this temple in Malta, the frequency of 111 Hz was used to cure the sick, and then I remember visiting Stephanie Peterson, her website, where she explains perfectly about frequencies. One of her charts showed the 37th harmonic and how it was aligned to the 5th tone and the letter G and the number 55.5, and all of what are known as the angel numbers 55.5, 111, 222, 444, etc., or just the doubling of the numbers. The doubling of the 37th harmonic to 74 gave the frequency of twice 55.5 Hz to 111 Hz, the frequency used in the temple in Malta. The number 555 is the most important number of the Freemasons. They display this number on their highest tracing board. The Washington obelisk just happens to be 555 feet and 5 inches in height. The distance from Greenwich in England to the Vatican in Rome just happens to be 555.555 minutes of arc. Freemasonry is really a school of knowledge, usually indicated by symbols or allegory or numbers. When King Solomon asked the Israelites to bring him 666 talents of gold to the temple each year, what he was really saying was, when you divide the number 666 by the 12 tribes, you get the number 55.5, the same number that is associated with the 5th tone. The 5th tone aligns with the letter G, which is the highest symbol in a Freemason's lodge. It is placed outside the Grand Lodge of Washington. The 5th note G is also associated with King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, and the note Sol, which in turn leads to the solfeggio scale with the repeating numbers 369. These numbers 369 seems to hold a certain secret. They are usually drawn within a circle with interjoining lines. Could the lines between 3, 6 and 9 create the square and compasses? Now, according to Stephanie's image, the 369 triangle creates the perfect 5th, and the line drawn perpendicular down from the number 9 perfectly bisects the 3-6 line at 4.5, the midway point. The word Mason, according to Stephanie, comes from the Greek word meson, which means the midway point or the perfect center. The inventor, Nikola Tesla, makes the observation that to discover the secrets of the universe, you must first know about frequency and vibration. He then adds in the numbers 3, 6 and 9. The lines drawn between the numbers 3, 6 and 9 create a triangle. This triangle is called a right-angled triangle, and we associate this triangle with Pythagoras' theorem and his triangle of 3, 4, 5. This is another of the main symbols associated with the Grand Lodge of England, and here is the image taken from the Grand Lodge of England which is associated with Pythagoras. To highlight how important these numbers, they are shown on the apprentice Freemason's tunic in this Masonic church. But another of its associations is the concept of electricity, where the triangle is used to determine the electrical values of the components of the circuit. These are called the hypotenuse, the opposite, and the adjacent. By being able to alter the mathematical values in the electrical circuit, we can change the voltage that is produced and also the frequency. This is extremely useful in today's technology, where the machines that we now use require much higher frequencies to reach the X-ray spectrum. This X-ray machine was the one used to treat my prostate cancer. It operates in the megahertz spectrum, but I have wondered why the number for the frequency in the temple at Malta was to be 111 Hertz. I then wanted to know how machines could produce this frequency of 111 Hertz. So I went back to the electrical circuit to see how the sine wave was produced and its values obtained. It has been determined that the average value of the sine wave is 0.6368. Of the whole value 1, it has also been determined that at an angle of halfway between the right angle triangle, which is 45 degrees, the sine of this angle is 0.707. This is called the root mean square value, and it is how electricity is measured. For calculating electrical values, the root mean square value of 0.707 is divided by the average value 0.6368. We then get the number of 1.11. For reasons I can't explain, sometimes with mathematics, the decimal point can be neglected. This would give the number 111, the same frequency as the cave in Malta. To understand how much voltage is produced in a circuit, we multiply 1.11 by 4, the number of times the right-angled triangle of 90 degrees passes through a 360-degree sine wave, and then multiply that number by the number of turns on the coil, and then multiply that number by the value of the wire in the coil, and then multiply that number by the frequency wave in hertz. This gives us the voltage of the circuit. It may seem like rocket science, but it's not. By changing any component in the circuit, we can alter the voltage. In today's world, it seems as if everything is powered by electricity, and now to operate many of our electrical gadgets, we use computers. These computers use a code. It is called binary code. Binary code is just ones and O's. This is how it works. Each dash is a multiple of twice the previous dash, starting with the number 1, and then doubling to 2, and then doubling to 4, and then doubling to 8, and then doubling to 16, and then doubling to 32, and then doubling to 64, and finally doubling to 128. These 8 digits are all known as bits, and all 8 digits combine to make up 1 byte. You will often hear the term 1 gigabyte. This means 1 trillion bytes of information is stored or moved. The noughts are placed either side of the dashes to indicate
that there is no number between the dashes. An example is as follows. The number 101. The first dash indicates that there is a 1. The naught indicates there is no number 2. The second dash indicates that there is a 4. When we add 1 and 4 together, we arrive at the number 5. This is how all computers recognise each other.
What I've always found interesting is the number for God. God has always been associated with the number 7. For many reasons, the main one is where in the 7th chapter of Amos, in the 7th verse, God stands on a wall with a plumb line in his hand and takes a measurement. It just so happens that the binary code for 7 is 111 or 111.
The first dash is a 1. The second dash is 2. And the third dash is 4. By adding 1 plus 2 plus 4, we get the number 7.
To the Freemasons, who put symbols everywhere, 111 is usually attached to the trident, like upon the front wall of Customs House in Sydney. The trident is usually shown with the god of the seas, Poseidon. But back to my treatment for prostate cancer. Was the treatment difficult? I can honestly say no. I had previously had radiation treatment and chemotherapy for a cancer I had had 11 years ago, which was a tumour in my right shoulder. Unfortunately, the cancer was too far advanced, and I had to have my right shoulder and arm amputated. The radiation and chemotherapy treatment that I had brought me enough time for the surgeon to save my life. Before I had the cancer, my day job was as an electrician, and after my original cancer, I became a teacher of electricity at a college. This entailed me once again learning about everything electrical. One of the subjects to be taught was entitled piezoelectricity, where certain crystals are compressed to make electricity. One of the benefits of this system of electricity is today's LED lighting, one of the most efficient lighting concepts on the market. But here's the thing I like to bring to the table. The crystals used to create electricity are placed inside the high priest's breastplate. There are 12 in number, one for each of the zodiac signs and the tribes of Israel. John the Baptist's father, Zechariah, as the high priest, would have been chosen to wear this breastplate, and his son John would have been taught by the Sandhedran how to use these crystals. John baptized Jesus with the symbol of knowledge, the clamshell. However, Jesus' grandfather was also the assistant high priest of the temple. His name was Joachim or Jarkin. He was Mary's father. Jarkin would have also been associated with the Sanhedrin, and therefore aware of the use of the crystals and the symbol for initiation, the clamshell. We could ask ourselves, did Jesus understand all of this ancient knowledge taught by the Sanhedrin in the temple, and then in his later life use it to heal the sick people? I believe the answer is yes. By now you should have reached the conclusion that Freemasonry is a school of knowledge, a school that has been set up to benefit mankind, and hopefully with this knowledge we can one day rid the world of this dreadful disease we call cancer. If you have reached this far and would like to know more about how I get on with my treatment, please subscribe, and then over the years I will explain more about the Freemasons and their school of knowledge.